The Pokemon world is pretty great, all things considered. Pokemon and humans live together in harmony, you get to travel the world with your friends and go on endless adventures. Sounds pretty great. However, there are a few things in every Pokemon generation that just strike me as a bit eerie. And I think because of how happy the series is overall, it only makes those little moments like that stick out that much more. Which is why I'll be talking about some of the scariest things in every Pokemon generation. Just creepy little things. A little eerie. Fun little Halloween video. Happy Halloween, by the way, guys. Starting, of course, with Generation 1. Lavender Town is stuck in the minds of many, and I can definitely see why. This place is pretty creepy. All the other towns in Kanto are pretty happy in tone, and are bustling with life at every corner. But Lavender Town is the complete opposite. The moment you get there, you're immediately met with this eerie song, and the tone just shifts completely. Then you find out people here are mourning their dead Pokemon, and it's just not a great place to be. And I think this really helped kick off old school game creepypastas because one of the most infamous ones is Lavender Town Syndrome. It's not a real thing, guys, don't worry. But how the story goes is that apparently the original Japanese versions of Pokemon Red and Green had a different pitch version of the Lavender Town theme, which apparently, this sounds stupid, made kids want to end their life. Yeah, I don't know how anyone believed this back then. It's such a dumb story, but we were dumb kids, so I guess it balances out. While the story is obviously not true, some people do believe that the frequency was different in the English release, but nope, Bulbapedia says it's not. And I trust Bulbapedia with my life. It'll show up to save me one day, trust. When you revisit it in the Generation 2 games, it isn't anywhere near as creepy as it was before, and same goes for the 2 Kanto remakes, or I guess 4, which kind of ruins it, to be honest. The whole appeal is that the town's creepy. I think the main thing that makes this place creepy though is definitely Pokemon Tower. But before we get any deeper into that, we have a sponsor today. If you love games like Pokemon, The Legend of Zelda, and Octopath Traveler, listen up, because I think you'll be interested in Elestrals Awakened. It's a 2.5D monster catching RPG with a pixel art style set in a world inspired by Greek mythology. There's 8 different elemental spirits, those being Earth, Fire, Water, Thunder, Wind, Frost, Solar, and Lunar, and over 100 different Elestrals to catch and train. On top of monster catching, this game also features RPG exploration and bullet hell boss battles. And if you're a fan of shiny hunting, Stellar Rare Elestrals are alternate colored forms with unique abilities and features. Some Elestrals are even able to ascend and evolve into stronger forms, and some also have a Nexus form, which allows you to change their element to another and changes their appearance accordingly. It's a really cool system. On top of that, Elestrals also have Awakened forms, which are the original transcended state of spirits and Elestrals. This is a limited time Kickstarter, so if you're interested in checking this game out, the link is in the description below. If you do, you'll be able to get alpha and beta access, get exclusive in-game unlocks, and even become an NPC or a caster in the game. This is a really cool passion project, so I recommend checking it out. And don't worry, this game will be both on PC and Nintendo Switch. Thank you Elestrals Awakened for sponsoring this video. Anyways, Pokemon Tower is a pretty creepy place. This is where people come to bury their dead Pokemon, which was already a pretty grim thing to talk about, especially in the first game. When you show up to Pokemon Tower, Blue questions you, saying your Pokemon don't look dead, which heavily implies that, hey, one of his Pokemon must be dead. Otherwise, he wouldn't be questioning why I'm here, because then we'd both be guilty. And what makes this place even scarier is the fact that Team Rocket killed a Marowak while it was trying to protect its child. You can even battle the ghosts, and I just want to say they absolutely nailed this ghost sprite. It looks so creepy, but also cool. I know this whole thing is such an old thing to be talking about, but like, really think about it. The whole thing's pretty crazy. I don't think Pokemon would ever do something this dark again. The Silphco Bomber. In the Silphco building while Team Rocket is invading, you can find a woman on one of the floors who gets scared when she sees you. Understandably so, since the building is being infiltrated by a bunch of Team Rocket grunts. But when she realizes you're not with Team Rocket, she gives you the TM for self-destruct, which only leads to more questions. Was she willing to blow herself up along with countless others if it weren't for you stopping her? Like, I feel like this is such a deliberate choice to make. Why out of all the places to find the TM for self-destruct, it's here? Very strange. Hypno. Hypno has got to be one of the creepiest Pokemon ever, and I'm sure pretty much everyone watching understands why. This thing in-universe lures out children to the forest and hypnotizes them. And I mean, just look at this thing. It looks terrifying, and not even like a horror movie type of way. If I saw this thing at the end of an alleyway, I'd turn the other way. But seriously, who knows how many children in-universe have gone missing because of this thing? Who knows if they were ever found? Ugh. Generation 2, the House of Memories. After Lavender Town got its whole remodel, all the graves needed a place to go, and that's what the House of Memories is. It's kind of strange to me though. I feel like that's kind of a messed up thing to do. Just like get all the graves and move them. I feel like that just result in a bunch of restless spirits, no? But morals aside, wouldn't it have been less work to make a brand new tower instead of turning the haunted graveyard into a radio tower? Like, I feel like it doesn't really make any sense. Whatever. Point is, this house has a bunch of chambers underneath with dead Pokemon, and Mr. Fuji's the only one who's allowed to access it. It's overall pretty grim. And in Japanese, it's called the Soul House, the Burn Tower. I feel like the Burn Tower story would be seen as way more scary than it is if it wasn't for the happy ending at the end. If you don't know, 150 years prior to Pokemon Gold and Silver, the tower was struck by lightning, causing it to get caught on fire. Unfortunately, 3 Pokemon were in there and sadly perished in the fire. Thankfully, Ho-Oh came to revive them as Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, Moon, but if it hadn't done that, this would be such a sad and tragic story. I can't imagine the amount of fear and dread those 3 Pokemon must have felt trying to escape this burning tower, but being unable to. Getting burned alive sounds horrible, and yes, while they were reborn, they still had to live through that. It's quite sad. The Ruins of Alph. The Ruins of Alph has always struck me as a really creepy place in the Pokemon world. Maybe this mostly has to do with the eerie music that plays there, but that combined with the strange hieroglyphics that you find just makes this place so unsettling. Like from our perspective, it's just letters in the English alphabet, but in the Pokemon world, nobody knows what these letters mean. They're just complete gibberish. There's even really creepy radio transmissions here, and we don't ever get an explanation as to what these transmissions are or why they're so creepy. It sounds like something that you're not supposed to be listening to. Just take a listen. Creeps me out. Slowpoke tails. While the legality of eating slowpoke tails is kind of up in the air and varies from place to place, what Team Rocket did to them is really messed up. What most likely happened is that they would farm a bunch of slowpokes together and put them in a never-ending cycle of forcefully cutting off their tail just to have them regrow and repeat the process. And although they don't really feel pain, it's still such a cruel thing to do to a Pokemon. It's in this never-ending cycle of regrowing its tail just to have it chopped off, never being allowed to leave, all for the sole purpose of profit. Generation 3. Mount Pyre Graveyard. Mount Pyre has a ton of graves of dead Pokemon. Nothing inherently bad happened here, but I think any place with a ton of graves is bound to be at least a little creepy. I do think it's a little strange though that these people choose to bury their Pokemon on an island with a volcano instead of your typical cemetery. Wally is dead. In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, in your final battle with Wally, the background is filled with flowers. To anyone who doesn't know what these are, this doesn't seem that important, but those aren't regular flowers. Those are red spider lilies. In Japan and China, those flowers are often associated with death, the afterlife, and sad memories. And because we know that Wally is sick, many people believe that this was one of his final moments before he unfortunately passed away. We do get to see Wally again though in Pokemon Sun and Moon, but this only added more fuel to the fire. We see Red and Blue age a significant amount, and with Ruby and Sapphire taking place at the same time as Red and Blue, we can assume that Wally would have aged just as much, but he didn't. He looks exactly the same. So many point at this as proof that Wally has unfortunately passed away, and being unable to age, he's stuck looking like that forever. However, those flowers can also symbolize renewal and personal growth. So seeing those in your final battle with him can also just mean that Wally truly has grown a whole bunch since he first started his adventure. And hopefully that was the intention. Otherwise, the other option is just straight up death. Generation 4, Lost Tower. There's a lot more places with dead Pokemon than I originally thought. The Lost Tower is the resting ground for deceased Pokemon in Sinnoh. We don't really get much lore about this tower though. One of the few things that we do know about it though is quite grim. A trainer visits the Lost Tower to mourn the death of his Pokemon, but it didn't just die, it was killed, more specifically by Team Galactic. I feel like this is often just brushed over because I never really hear anyone talk about it, but it's really sad. The Old Chateau. This place is almost as well known as Lavender Town, and it's not surprising. This place is incredibly creepy. Hidden deep in Eterna Forest, there's just this giant mansion, and when you enter it, you see an old man and a little girl who seem to vanish and appear without a trace. It's not exactly clear what happened here, but a very popular theory is that the butler poisoned the family to inherit their wealth. You're able to find the butler in the dining room where he most likely poisoned their food. In that very same room, you're also able to find a poison antidote hidden in a trash can, almost like someone threw it away on purpose so nobody could use it. The only Pokemon aside from Rotom you can find here are the Ghastly line, which are ghost types, but more importantly, they're also poison types. But if this was true, that wouldn't explain why the butler is also dead. So either he also poisoned himself or he's not the culprit. However, one key thing a lot of people tend to miss is that the description of the old chateau reads, "It is falling into disrepair after being abandoned by its owner." So the owner didn't die, he left it behind, almost like he's fleeing the scene of the crime. Another option is that Rotom is the one behind these deaths. Maybe he was haunting the house and ended up killing them as a result, causing the owner to not flee out of guilt, but fear. This is all of course just speculation, but I think it's clear that some sort of tragedy happened here. The fact that we will never get a clear answer is what makes this mystery so intriguing. The Distortion World. I'm sure that you've all heard of the Distortion World before, but what exactly is it? A lot of people just chalk it up to the Pokemon world's equivalent of hell, but I don't think that's the case at all. This thing has been around for such a long time, but we don't have any answers as to what it even is. The laws of physics don't seem to apply here. There's random floating islands everywhere, and there's no other Pokemon here besides Giratina, almost like it was isolated here so that it can never escape. According to old interviews with Junichi Masuda and Takeshi Kawachimaru, they said Giratina along with the Distortion World are personifications of antimatter. Antimatter affects the real world's matter and vice versa, making a point to say that antimatter is more fragile than matter. I think this is the best explanation that we will get for a very long time. Turnback Cave. Turnback Cave is something not a lot of people talk about, but it's such a strange location. Each room has a dense fog, and it's almost like every room is just one giant loop with no exit. There's even really eerie music that plays here. The inscriptions you find on the wall just says random numbers, not making any sense. But the central pedestal tells us what exactly is up with this place. It reads, "This is that where life sparkles, that where life has faded, a place where two worlds overlap. Turnback Cave is the place where the barrier between the distortion world and our world is the weakest, which is why you can find Giratina here or a portal to the distortion world. A place like this shouldn't exist, yet it does. Cyrus. We know that Cyrus was the evil leader of Team Galactic, but we still don't really know much about him beyond that. Apparently, Cyrus was worn down by his parents' expectations and found refuge by tinkering with machines. His grandfather, who lived on Route 228 in Pokemon Platinum, regrets not taking him in during his time of need. Cyrus was a good student who couldn't live up to his parents' expectations, making him feel alone and like a failure. Something that's also pretty chilling is the fact that no one knew Cyrus's nihilistic plan to completely destroy the current universe and create a new one devoid of spirit and emotion. Cyrus was able to successfully manipulate everyone in Team Galactic. Even some of the most high-ranking members didn't know. All they knew was that he was planning on making a new world, not fully understanding that meant destroying the current one entirely. Cyrus also ominously hints that he will someday make his ultimate goal into a reality, but now he's left to rot in the distortion world for all eternity, left to ponder and wonder, why did his life have to turn out this way? And we essentially killed him by leaving him there. Darkrai. The Darkrai event is really strange. You enter a house with a guy who laughs and mentions you have a reservation, and then you're forced to go to sleep in the bed. When you wake up, you're mysteriously on an island unable to leave. Then you see the very embodiment of nightmares itself, Darkrai, just sitting there. Then the chilling realization that it's the reason you're here sets in. You're in a nightmare right now. The ones people say that you can never wake up from, and the only way out is to face the Darkrai. After you catch it, you wake up from the nightmare, and you are then told that the house you were just at has been abandoned for years, which leaves you with the question, who was that man? Was it one of Darkrai's victims? Was it luring people in so that Darkrai could make them sleep forever and kill them? Very unsettling. Package. In Celestic Town, a galactic grunt mentions a package that's going to destroy Celestic Town, which if you couldn't guess, the package turns out to be a bomb. After battling the grunt, you're able to save Celestic Town, but they instead take the bomb to Lake Valor where it goes off. And after it goes off, it causes Lake Valor to evaporate, which is pretty crazy. Not many other evil teams have bombed anything, only Team Galactic. Though I suppose since Cyrus does plan on destroying the current world, any damage he does to it in his mind is basically not important, since it's gonna get destroyed anyway, which is a scary thought, because that means he genuinely has no limits on what he's willing to do to achieve his goal. Generation 5, the Marvelous Bridge Girl and the Strange House. On Marvelous Bridge, you're able to see a woman standing there, but approaching her will cause her to disappear. An old woman explains that a young girl used to play on this bridge with her Abra before the bridge was built, and that her spirit still roams here. In the sequels, we can find the very same girl in the Strange House, and here, we learn the truth. It's heavily implied that the cause of death was Darkrai because the girl was having constant nightmares. The Lunar Wing is an item that is able to wake up people from nightmares, and she was so close to receiving one. However, she didn't get it in time and unfortunately passed away. Now she wants you to return the wing to Cresselia since she wasn't able to make use of it, revealing the reason she was on the bridge in the first place was to return the wing herself. Celestial Tower. Celestial Tower is yet another large tower where people go to bury their deceased Pokemon. Again, we have seen places like this before, but this one feels especially gloomy because at the top of the tower is a bell, which mourners can ring in remembrance of their dead Pokemon. And I think being within hearing range of this bell would be pretty sad, because if you hear it ring, you know exactly why. When you make your way to the top of the tower, you can't even see the ground beneath you. You just see clouds, almost like you're in the heavens with your Pokemon. Getsis. In the first part of the game, Getsis has this calm demeanor talking to people, but later in the game, his true nature begins to show. After you defeat N, Getsis straight up says that he's going to eliminate you for knowing the truth, and I think it's very clear what he means by eliminate. He wants to straight up kill you. And this isn't the only time his psychotic nature is shown. In Pokemon Black and White 2, he threatens to freeze you right here and now, while having a bunch of ice spikes pointed at you. This isn't just going to freeze the player, he's going to impale you with spikes and kill you. He's insane. He doesn't even care about his most faithful followers, allowing them to be casualties in Reshiram's rampage once he gained control of it. He even goes as far as saying, "I'll handle you myself," implying that his Pokemon aren't going to kill you, he is. Not only that, but his team directly counters N's team. He was more than prepared to defeat him, and most likely was going to kill him so he could have the legendary to himself. And he only continues to get worse from there. In Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, he uses Lily as a hostage, and says that if you value this girl's life, throw aside all your Pokeballs. This guy is genuinely insane. He even forces Hydreigon to evolve early, and it has a full power frustration, meaning that his Pokemon absolutely hate him, which is not surprising in the slightest. N's room. N's room has always struck me as a bit creepy. It looks like this children's playroom with a bunch of toys lying around, but this combination with the eerie, off-putting music box playing just makes it so creepy. And this is only made worse by the fact that you can clearly tell just how lonely N was. This is the room he was brainwashed in, the room he spent the majority of his life inside of, yet it remains stagnant as this childish room. All the toys are meant to keep N distracted from the truth and make him not want to leave. N never really had a proper childhood. This room just feels like it's trying too hard to make you happy, like it's forcing a smile. Since Getsis didn't really care about N at all, this was the only way he could get him to not want to leave. It's a prison cell disguised as a children's play box, and it's chilling knowing that despite Getsis giving him so many toys, he was still planning on killing N with no remorse. That's why he was brainwashing him, so he wouldn't be able to fight back. Even in Pokemon Black and White 2, when you go to visit the castle with N, he says, "This place, was my entire world. When I was little, I was abandoned deep in the woods. The ones who took me in and raised me were the Pokemon who lived there. Then one day, a man appeared before me, claiming to be my father. That was Getsis. The things he gave me were the name Harmonia, the knowledge a king would need, Pokemon with their hearts shut so very tightly I couldn't even talk to them, and this room. I'll be outside. I can see why he'd not want to enter. It's so tragic. His entire childhood, he was brainwashed and held captive. Generation 6, the Lumio City Ghost Girl. This is probably one of the most well-known things on the entire list. In a building inside of Lumio City, if you take the elevator up to the second floor, something strange happens. When you step out of the elevator, the lights begin to flicker and the music stops. Then behind you, a Hex Maniac appears. She eerily floats across the floor without any walking animation, and the only thing she says to you is, "No, you're not the one," before disappearing entirely. And this freaked out a ton of people when the game first came out. Understandably so, because if I saw this for the first time, I would be pretty freaked out too. Until this day, we still don't have many answers. I did a whole video talking about some theories about her, but as far as anything official, we don't know much else. A horde of faceless men. In Pokemon X and Y, while on your way to Lavier City, your friends ask you to visit a haunted house. Before even going inside of it, the area around you is already a mist with it raining. When you enter, there's a man in the middle of the dark house all by himself, and he tells you a story about him arriving at this house. When he got here, the lights wouldn't turn on, and he saw a man huddled in the corner of the kitchen. He tried to explain he was lost, hoping he'd let him stay for the night. But the man suddenly screamed and said, "Stay back." He apologized and yet again asked for help. Before the man said that he's not talking to him, he asks if he can't see the horde of faceless men behind him, and that's the end of the story. After telling a story, the man immediately asks you for money, which leads me to believe that his whole story is a complete lie, and he just wanted some cash. If it was true, I don't think he'd be staying in the house alone in the dark while it's raining. What's eerie though is that during his entire story, the camera is in this far corner of the ceiling, and continues to gradually go down and shake like we're in the perspective of something watching the player. So while the story might not be true, the truly scary thing is that something might have been watching us that entire time. So maybe his story was true, but he just thought the guy was crazy, not realizing he was telling the truth all along. Phoebe's room. In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, at the Pokemon League when you're about to fight Phoebe, something very strange happens. For a split second, you're able to see a kid sitting in the background before vanishing the very next second. This is a blink and you miss it moment, and to only make things even creepier, when talking with Phoebe, the camera angle moves as if you're in the perspective of this ghost child. The ghost child isn't talked about in the game or even mentioned ever again. Since Phoebe does use ghost types, I assume she already knows of this ghost child's existence, and probably put that chair specifically for her. She did say that she trained on Mount Pyre, which if you remember, had a bunch of Pokemon graves there, and she says she gained the ability to commune with ghosts. But that still doesn't explain who she is and why she's here at the Pokemon League. Did she die here? Or is this someone Phoebe knew personally? We don't really know. The ultimate weapon. 3,000 years prior to the events of Pokemon X and Y, the king of Kalos, AZ, was forced to send his beloved Floette to fight in the Kalos War. This ultimately led to its death, which absolutely devastated AZ, and he was willing to bring his Floette back to life no matter what it took. So AZ built a machine to bring it back to life. But this wasn't your average electric machine. This machine was powered by the life force of other Pokemon, essentially killing them. He was successful, but the exposure to the power generated from the machine unintentionally granted both AZ and his Floette immortality, also making AZ a giant as a side effect. And though he succeeded, AZ still wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want to bring his Floette back to life, he wanted revenge on those who had killed his beloved Pokemon. This grudge he held made him turn the machine into the ultimate weapon. He shot both sides of the war, ending it almost instantly. When AZ's Floette finally realized that so many lives were lost merely to restore its own, it decided to leave AZ. Filled with regret, AZ took the key to the ultimate weapon and wandered the world aimlessly for eternity since he was now immortal, spending his time trying to look for his Floette. The weapon itself was buried underground by AZ's brother so it could never be used again. The graves of the Pokemon that were sacrificed can be found in Kalos on Route 10. He eventually did find his Floette though in Pokemon X and Y after 3,000 years. This is truly one of, if not the most tragic thing that has ever happened in the Pokemon world. Team Flare watching Pokemon die. After the ultimate weapon is activated and rises from the ground, if you enter the underground laboratory, there's some dialogue you can get from some Team Flare grunts blocking the exit of the town to Route 10. So, the ultimate weapon can only be powered with the life energy of Pokemon? Nope, I can't hear them. I won't listen to the Pokemon's cries. The mysterious stone is absorbing energy. I can't let you go beyond this point. A kid like you shouldn't be exposed to such sights. They're watching the life of Pokemon fade from their eyes, and it's honestly pretty surprising that they're considerate enough to not let you see these horrific sights. One of the grunts is even in denial to save his own sanity. I can't imagine just how horrific the Pokemon cries must have been. It's horrible. Lumio Station. If you go into Lumio Station and check behind the far timetable, you'll find a note that reads, "I'm going for help. Wait in the usual place." Now, some people think this has to do with the Lumio City Ghost Girl. I don't think so. I think it's completely unrelated. But what could this message even mean? What happened? Why does someone need help? What's the usual place? It's just really strange. Fairy Tale Girls. I never hear anyone bring up the Fairy Tale Girls, but basically, they're a trainer class you can fight in Pokemon X and Y, but they have really unsettling dialogue for no reason. Here are some examples. My dearest cuties whisper all kinds of secrets to me. Oh, phooey. Don't you ever come back. If you do, we're gonna end you. Okay? Shh. Rest now and close your eyes. You won't ever need open them again. All you have to do is ignore reality, and you can stay young forever too. The theory goes is that all of these kids are dead, and thus are never able to age. One fairy tale girl even says that she's old enough to be your mother, which either she's lying, she has really good genes, or she's dead. Whichever option it may be, they're very creepy regardless. Generation 7. Lucamine's collection. In Pokemon Sun and Moon at the Aether Foundation, you stumble across Lucamine's secret collection. She has a handful of Pokemon cryogenically frozen to preserve their beauty, and it's incredibly disturbing. She even has the audacity to gloat about these things and asks us what we think about it. She even refers to them as her babies. And what makes this even creepier is that earlier in the game, you stumble across a story that involved a Pikachu, Mewtwo, and Slowpoke, which just so happens to be some of the Pokemon you can find in this trophy room. Maybe Lily would have succumbed to the same fate if she stayed just a little longer with her mother, to make sure that she wouldn't disobey her again. Po Town. Most people just chalk up Team Skull to nothing but a bunch of group of idiots, but Po Town tells a different story. When you get there, it's dark and gloomy, with the whole town being trashed, the culprit being none other than Team Skull. They forcefully took over an entire town. People's homes and businesses were plundered, desecrated, and destroyed. Yeah, they might not be the smartest, but they still did some pretty cruel things. It's scary to see what kind of destruction Team Skull is really capable of, this town being proof of that. The Thrifty Mega Mart. On Ula Ula Island, you're able to visit this abandoned supermarket. It's completely trashed inside, and you're able to find a bunch of ghost-type Pokemon. The reason for its abandonment, though, is pretty disturbing. The place the village and supermarket were constructed was considered sacred ground by Tapu Bulu, so this angered it, causing the garden deity to destroy everything built in the area in a fit of rage. The people of this island worship this Pokemon, so for it to just go and destroy their village and for them to continue to worship them, it just seems wrong. Having your home completely destroyed, yet people still worship the Pokemon that did it, really doesn't sit right with me. Guzzlord. Guzzlord is the living personification of gluttony. It will consume entire worlds, yet still not be full. We even get to see what it's truly capable of. When we enter an Ultra Wormhole, we see a world completely in ruin because this thing was allowed to roam free. The Ultra Ruin is a destroyed Howley city, and its inhabitants fled to another planet to escape its gluttony. Seeing all the destruction and the lives this Ultra Beast affected is truly tragic, and it's scary to know that the Pokemon world almost succumbed to the same fate as this one. Mimikyu's true form. Mimikyu's Pokedex entry says that if a person were to see what lies underneath its cloth, they will flat out die. In Pokemon Ultra Moon, its entry reads, "A gust of wind revealed what hides underneath this Pokemon's rag to a passing trainer, who went home and died painfully that very night." So even if you don't intentionally look under its cloth, you will still die. But from what we understand, the death isn't instantaneous. So you're not dying from shock of what this thing looks like. Something is out there making sure that you will never tell anyone what you saw. Most likely the very same Mimikyu whose true form you saw. And what makes this even worse is that it makes sure you have a painful death. Generation 8. Volo is such a mysterious character. We honestly know almost nothing about him. For the entirety of Pokemon Legends Arceus, he has this fake facade, when in reality he had an ulterior motive all along. Even moments where he seems like a nice person, for example when he's asking Ingo if he remembers anything about the incident that made him lose his memories, he wasn't asking because he cares, he's asking because he wants to know how these portals work so he can make use of them himself. We do learn a few more things about Volo in Pokemon Legends ZA, so minor spoilers for that. Skip ahead if you want. The clothes he was wearing in his final battle were worn by people who worshipped Arceus, and this was long before the events of Legends Arceus. So how did he know about this, and how did he get his hands on it? We also know that he apparently donated that clothes to the Lumiose Museum, so we have two options here. Either Volo is a time traveler coming back from all the way in the ancient past, or Volo is immortal. Both of them are equally as eerie, but with him still out there, that means there's still an opportunity for him to plot his next scheme. Ghost Girl letter. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, you can find a kid in Hammerlock who wants you to deliver a very old letter to someone named Frank who she has a crush on. When you go to Bologna to deliver the letter, the man is happy to hear from this girl, but something's off. He says that it takes him back ages, and that Paula was a girl he spent his time playing with when he was a kid. But one day, they had a fight and he moved away soon after, never to meet her again. He asked how dear old Paula looked, and if she looked well. You're forced to either say yes or nothing at all. He then tells you to treasure those dear to you while you still have them close. In the corner of that very same room, there's a girl having a conversation with a wall who gets mad if you interrupt her, almost like she's talking to a ghost. Returning to where Paula was, you find a Reaper cloth and you hear someone whisper to you thanking you for delivering the letter. This is one of my favorite ghost interactions in Pokemon because it's so sweet but also sad. The Darkest Day. The Darkest Day is a major plot point in Pokemon Sword and Shield, but the actual event itself is pretty terrifying. It's described as a black storm that covered the Galar region 3,000 years ago. This happened because Eternatus attempted to stay alive by absorbing Galar's energy, causing a red light to appear and resulting in the Darkest Day. This event caused Pokemon to Dynamax and Gigantamax all across Galar, going berserk in the process, almost completely destroying the region. This was put to an end when Eternatus was defeated by Zacian and Zamazenta, along with 2 young trainers. But I believe that there's reason to believe that this was caused by the Ultimate Weapon. 3,000 years ago would have been around the same time the Ultimate Weapon was fired, causing Pokemon to die in order to power it. And if Eternatus was trying to stay alive, what was killing it, what it most likely was the Ultimate ultimate weapon sapping its life away. So while the war was most likely fought between Kalos and Paldea since they're so close in proximity, it's likely that Eternatus causing the Darkest Day was simply a domino effect from this weapon going off, causing a whole new catastrophe in Galar. Having just one Godzilla-sized Pokemon causing havoc already sounds terrible, so I can't imagine what having multiple of those around must be like. Generation 9, the Ruinous Quartet. 4 Pokemon brought a calamity so great in Paldea that they had to be sealed away to stop it. The 4 treasures of Ruin were once normal objects that originated from a distant land east of Paldea during ancient times. The 4 treasures in question were a set of wooden tablets, a sword, a vessel, and a set of beads. However, over the course of time, each one of these treasures was corrupted by negative human emotions, those being grudge, hatred, fear, and envy. This caused these objects to come to life and cover themselves with dead leaves, snow, ice, dirt, and rocks, along with fire to create each of their bodies, which is how the quartet came to be. One day though, a merchant came to Paldea with these 4 treasures and presented them to the Paldean king. The treasure-obsessed king bought all of them instantly and kept them in his castle with his other treasures. However, the king's greed was ultimately his downfall. This caused the 4 treasures to awaken, transforming into their Pokemon forms. Now alive, the 4 Pokemon went berserk and caused a disaster that completely destroyed the castle and almost the entire kingdom. Eventually though, they were defeated and sealed away in different shrines scattered across the Paldea region by Pokemon wielders, and they were left there till this day. That is until the player came along and released the seals, causing these Pokemon to roam free once more. It's scary that the only thing that really perpetuated this whole calamity was just the sheer negativity of human emotions. For example, Wo-Chien came to be by the grudge of a person punished for writing the king's evil deeds upon wooden tablets. However, something worth noting is that a merchant was the one who brought these things to Paldea in the first place, and Pokemon wielders are the ones who defeated it. Volo was a merchant, and his trainer class is Pokemon wielder, and this was also during ancient times. I can't help but get the feeling that Volo was somehow involved in this in some way, but this is just speculation. Area 0. Area 0 has always been kind of an unnerving place to me. I think most of the eeriness stems from this place being located in a giant million-year-old crater right in the middle of Paldea, and you would expect this place to be completely in ruins, but no. It's like a paradise, almost too perfect, and this place is completely off limits to everyone. I think the fact knowing that this place is for the most part completely cut off from the outside world makes it feel so isolating. I guess the best way I can describe it is uncanny. It's not scary, but it's just weird. The music here is also really strange. It sounds almost alien, like something bizarre or outer-worldly is happening. The Underdeaths are even weirder. They were formed 2 million years ago and have crystals all over the place, along with Paradox Pokemon that shouldn't even exist. I just have so many questions. How was this crater formed in the first place? We know that Terrapagos is the source of terrestrialization, but not much else beyond that. It apparently also has the ability to warp space and time. How? Why? What is this thing's connection with Pokemon types exactly? What even is the Stellar type? We have so many questions, yet no answers. The Professor Paradox. The events of Scarlet and Violet are one big giant paradox. It's very difficult to wrap my head around, but I'll try my best to explain. 200 years prior to the game's events, Heath and the Area Zero expedition team reached the bottom at Area Zero. Being the first one in recorded history to do so, Heath began writing down everything he could about the Urban Mystica, the various wild Pokemon, and documented his first encounter with a Paradox Pokemon. He recorded his research in the Scarlet or Violet book, but ended up being accused of lying. The whole expedition was discredited by the general public, even though they were telling the truth. Years pass, and the professor reads the book that Heath wrote when they were a kid, which resulted in them being obsessed with it. And 10 years prior to the game's events, they started their own expedition into Area Zero, setting up the Zero Lab. Eventually, they moved permanently into the Zero Lab to continue research on Area Zero and Paradox Pokemon as a part of the Terra Project, leaving their son Arvin behind to take care of themselves. However, at one point during their research, they got sent to the future via the Crystal Pool in Kitakami, where they received a white book from a child. With the help of this book, they created a time machine that allowed them to bring Paradox Pokemon to their timeline. However, Heath somehow encountered a Paradox Pokemon years before the time machine ever existed, which means that Paradox Pokemon didn't just slip into the present day, but also into the past and future. So when Heath encounters this Paradox Pokemon, he draws it into his book, which results in the professor reading about it when they're a kid, inspiring them to do their own research on Area Zero, and will lead to them creating the time machine so that Heath can see a Paradox Pokemon. So that's one big giant loop. But of course, there's still the white book. Where did that come from? In the Scarlet and Violet DLC, taking Terrapagos to the Kitakami pool warps space and time, and we see the professor. We give them the white book Briar wrote in exchange for their Scarlet or Violet book, and in your conversation, you give them the inspiration to create the AI, and also give them the name for Miraidon or Koraidon, and with that knowledge, they were able to create the time machine, sparking the whole chain of events all over again. It goes on forever. Without time travel existing in the first place, none of this would have ever happened, thus the paradox. For example, Miraidon's name truly has no source, since the professor's the one who tells you the name in the first place, and that's what we're led to believe. So when the professor asks about what its name is, we tell them the name that the professor professor told us, thus resulting in the professor telling us Miraidon's name. It's a never-ending cycle. So us giving the professor the white book sparks the whole chain of events all over again. It goes on forever. This shouldn't be possible, thus the paradox. It's disturbing that we play a part in this whole ordeal, yet we can't break the chain of events or else who knows what might happen. So no matter what, we have to play a part in the professor's death. I wonder what the original timeline would have looked like if we never got ourselves involved in the first place. This video turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it would be, and I'm still missing a ton of things. So if you have anything else that creeps you out in Pokemon, feel free to leave it down below. Go check out Halloween headcanons, and there's also this video where I talk about Pokemon creepypastas and how I think they're dumb. Like the video, comment, subscribe, follow my socials, and I'll catch you all later, everyone. Bye!